Miller, and today I'm with Sam Posey, and we are doing a Spark interview for the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. How did you get into motorsports racing?
I got into racing through my mother, who was a driver of great quality and ambition. And she had interesting cars that had for driving, and I was allowed to buy a 300 SL Mercedes when I was 14 years old.
Right.
And I still own the car, or my son does now. He gave it to him.
Oh my gosh.
But I found that I had an ability to drive cars in a way that other people couldn't. It was just that simple. And I loved being good at something. I was terrible at school and sports and everything, but here was one little niche of the world that I could be good at. And so that's how I got involved in racing.
So that's how you created a passion for racing. Very nice. Your mother. That's very sweet. Yeah. Yeah, I read a little bit about her. She definitely sounds like an amazing woman. Was she one of the biggest influencers of your life, your mother?
My mother, yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
I'll do that. My mother was a wonderful influence on my life. She lived to be 94. And, I miss her terribly because she just was someone who had the outlook that I wanted to have on racing and life, a positive outlook, and getting a positive outlook, but also one that was fun.
I agree. That's positive and a fun outlook. And that's what you've created the passion then for the racing with that outlook in life. And who was your heroes in the motorsports industry?
My heroes do not include David Hobbs, that miserable son of a bitch, who beat me in damn near every race we ever raced against each other. But somehow he blundered through and won these championships that I really should have won. And I deeply resent his presence in the sport, which I so love. I think it diminished the quality of the sport tremendously. The sport has been incredibly good to me. I have driven virtually every kind of car. We're writing a book, my son and I, and the book, which is called Sam's Scrapbook, is going to be out in a month or so. We're looking forward to it immensely. My son and I worked on this very hard for a long period of time. He's a wonderful editor, and he has a genius for taking a story that I would tell about some incident and making it into something that's usable.
What was your most memorable race?
My most memorable race was probably one of the ones that I did well in. That limits it right away. So I can tell you that my most memorable race was a third place at Le Mans. And next to that, a fifth place at Indianapolis. Two of the biggest races in the world, and I scored well in both, which is really something I'm very proud of. Then there are the ones that I'm not proud of. Crashes and breakdowns of the cars and disappointments of one kind or another. Those outweigh the great achievements, which makes those achievements worth even more. And my son had a way of taking my stories and turning it into an essay, edited and ready to go within minutes.
What advice can you give young people who want to pursue motorsports career?
Young people come to me and say, how can I get involved with racing? And I tell them, if you have to ask me, you're not going to make it as a good driver. Because driving is a passion, and it's something that you can't buy that.
What was your favorite and most memorable part of your career? Motorsports, journalism, broadcasting?
Things happened in a sequence for me. First there was the racing, then there was the television, and now the painting and things that are away from racing directly, which I miss terribly. But let it be said that I enjoyed every phase tremendously. And my advice to young people who want to get involved, buy a go-kart. Start with the least machine you can think of driving, and you think of getting the most out of it.
What advice would you give your young self?
My advice to John was very limited, because he had a talent for it right from the beginning. He won races over at Lime Rock in a Mazda right from the get-go, and there wasn't anything I could say to him that would help except good going and where's the victory circle, you know. Because we'd go over there to see him do the last lap and then drive in and everybody swarm around him, and it was an unimaginable thrill for me as a car owner and as a dad. And the question of nerves comes up because my wife Ellen and I would stand down there in turn one and just be terrified that something would go wrong. He was driving a Mazda most of the time, and that's a darn good car for a beginner, and a darn good car for somebody who's got a lot of experience too. And I didn't realize how nervous I could become, and I wondered how my mother ever survived my racing career. The one thing she insisted on was that she not watch the Indy 500. She went to her laundry and ironed shirts for 3 hours.
She was proud of you as she were of your son.
Yeah. That's when sort of she was proud of me, and I knew it. She didn't come right out and say it, but I could tell from the way she handled situations. I had a terrible crash out in Riverside, and my car and the other car involved both caught fire, and there are spectacular pictures of my car tipped up on its side, burning. And we went from there to the pits and bought another car on the spot. And I knew she was I knew she felt that she had to do the thing that would continue my career and not stop in the middle of something because something terrible had happened.
So what are you most proud of in your life?
Being proud of something is, of course, an ego trip that is to be avoided if you can help it. But at the same time, pride is part of what you would want to do when you get in the car. You want to do something that you're going to be proud of. That may mean taking the downhill at Lime Rock flat out when the other guys can't. It would mean staying in the car when you were so exhausted that you couldn't even steer the darn thing. Those are moments that you get proud of yourself for surviving. And that's it, really. I mean, survival is the name of the game in racing. You have to be out there in race after race and not make mistakes. Mistakes are fatal in racing. No, they literally can be fatal. And I had a relationship with extreme danger that I ignored. I have, looking back now and working on this book with my son, the number of potentially fatal crashes is about 3 or 4 where the car was completely demolished and burning and that kind of thing. And I feel very, very lucky to have survived those things. And I think luck is there's nothing you can say about luck that isn't an exaggeration. There's nothing you can say about luck that is an understatement. I have had crashes that were potentially fatal and gotten away with it. I'll knock on wood, because I think about these things, and I think how lucky I've been. I wish I'd made more of the opportunities that were there, but I think at the same time you come out the other end of this and you're still in one piece. You're pretty pleased with the seeing, and I shuttle between arrogance and thinking how many people I beat, and humility, which is the people I didn't beat, and the things that went very terribly wrong, but didn't pay the price.
What advice do you have for young people today?
I'm full of advice for people, young people coming along, but I don't open my mouth about it because racing is something you really teach yourself, and somebody can't come along and help you much, although I was helped by a wonderful driver named John Fitch, who said, "Sam, you know, the racing takes place on the black stuff, not the green stuff," by which he meant you go off the road way too much. I might also say that John Fitch was an inventor and a skilled man at everything he did. And one of the things about Lime Rock, which I'm involved with as a part owner now, in a very minor way, but something I'm very pleased about. John knew a guy named Bill Milliken at the Cornell labs, and Bill Milliken looked at the plans for the track and he said, "I'll just suggest one thing. Have the end of the turn splay out a little bit so that you gain speed as the track widens in front of you. So your speed is being matched by the condition of the track." And that has made Lime Rock one of the best tracks in the world. And it's very short, it's a mile and a half, but every part of it is brilliant and impossible to get right. I've driven there for years. I was the first guy to go under a minute there, which was a big deal. And I was the first guy to win the reverse race as well. Had everybody going around backwards. An invention of mine that was very successful, if I say so myself. Lime Rock is a part of my life because it's where I started, it's where I did all my early racing. And it remains to this day the most challenging track in the country, despite the fact that it's so short. Every part of it is fast. There's no hairpin. Hairpins slow you down. What we have is a turn that's like Indianapolis, a downhill fast turn that requires 120 mile an hour stuff, you know. And there's something about the track and the location and the people that run it. It's just exceptional right along the way. Skip Barber, a good friend of mine, owns the track or has owned it. And I think that without Lime Rock, I wonder if my career would have gone anywhere nearly what it was, what it did, because I was able to drive there long before I was legally able to have a license. But because we were part owners of the track, the insurance thing was different, and I was able to get out there for 3 or 4 years with a form car, a Formula V, a slow car that was great in potential for teaching you things. I won my second race in this class of Formula V, and in many ways my career was patterned after Sterling Moss's. He had a Cooper with a motorcycle engine in it, and the class had 30 people, 30 cars, and it was a chance to learn something about racing in a way that was not expensive and pretty safe, you know. And I enjoyed my relationship with Sterling through the years. He's a wonderful man and dead now, but just a super guy. And you know, heroes were a big part of my career, I think. It was Mike Hawthorne, who was a contemporary of Sterling Moss's, and I loved his style. And he was the kind of guy that after the race he'd find a girl, and that would be that for the evening. You know. And other heroes, Mark Donahue, who was killed tragically in Austria. I had been on his team, the Camaros, 1968, driving for Roger Penske. And Mark and I just got on fabulously. And when I was fifth at Indy, he was first. He won everything, and it was just like business as usual, you know, to have Mark win and me somewhere in the dust. Peter Revson, another guy who was killed, shouldn't have been killed. It was just a terrible thing, given his potential as a human being, never mind as a racer. And but there's nothing you can do about it. And I was in South Africa where, and I saw where he went off, and there was still trees broken down around that area. It hadn't been that long before. And he and I had gone tarpon fishing together in Florida. He always came to our house here, and he said, "Sam, you think too much." And I took that as a compliment and tried to make the most out of it. That he was a whiz at racing, and Dan Gurney. Dan and I became very close. It seems like listing a lot of people who are either dead or on the edge like me. But Dan was a legend, and when we were at Amelia Island, this concourse they have, he and I got in a golf cart and we're going around, and the crowds were just dense and terrific, you know, and I could hear people saying, "That's Dan Gurney." "Hi, Sam." I was in their living room. They felt they knew me, you know, and I always loved that moment. And the television, it was wonderful for me. I got involved when Jackie Stewart couldn't make it for Monaco and Indy the same day, and he got his choice about which he would rather go to, and he picked Monte Carlo, and that opened the door for ABC looking for somebody who could replace him, and by sheer luck they picked me, and I'd done some stuff with them before and they liked it, and they said, "Sam, can you think you'd try the expert commentator role here at Indy?" And I said, "Well, give me a try." And so I did do well. There were a lot of reasons for it. I was a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design, and we had a history of art teacher that his way of testing was to put a slide up, and you had 5 minutes to identify the slide and write a short essay as logically as you could. And when I was trying out, in effect, for the job at ABC, I was sitting next to Jim McKay in the booth, and he nodded, and I knew it was my turn to say something. So I said, I identified the car and driver, Tom Sneva, in a March. And then I said something about Tom Sneva, and shut up. When I got down to the compound, everybody crowded around and said, "You were terrific." So that was a great thrill for me. And I went on to work for ABC for 22 years, and then NBC, and now NBC again. And I won an Emmy, you know, which I'm really proud of. You can see it up there next to the tractor. I try not to take this stuff too seriously, but to win an Emmy was really quite a thrill for me, I've got to admit. And I still remember the moment of hearing my name, and the winner is, you know. That was largely because of a series of shows I did on a guy crossing Antarctica with a dog sled team, and he was a remarkable man, and I enjoyed working with him, and I think it showed. But the part that won it for me was a wide shot of snow and ice and everything. Typical Antarctica, that's all there is, snow and ice. And I could sense the dog sled guys were going to come around this mound of ice and come right at me. So I said nothing, and I watched them come up and go by, and that was it. And I believe I won the Emmy for Best Writing for not saying anything. Stuff like that happened a lot for me, and for one thing, it was a great way to make a living. These guys weren't kidding around. One year after the race, Jim McKay and I went out to the airport, and we were both going to the same place, and the pilot came up and said, "Jim, I'm so-and-so." He said, "We're going to Westchester." So there were two planes, two Lear jets, going to the same airport with the same crew that had just finished the Indy 500. And that's the kind of waste that ABC indulged themselves in, you know. I mean, they were pleased to have me have my own jet, you know. But unfortunately, those days came to an end when ABC couldn't sustain the level of interest with the audience. Don't know how I got off on that tangent, but
glad you did. That's interesting.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm glad you did.
Oh, good. Well, it makes a good story. See, it's stories like that that are in the book.
Right.
And we've got just a little of everything in there.
Do you like working with your son?
Oh boy, that would be an understatement. Do I like working with my son? I love working with my son. And fortunately, he seems to like working with me. Although I think he's very gracious about my shortcomings. It's still a fun thing to be doing. Because he has an ability to take a story and turn it into a viable essay in this time it takes to write the stuff down. He just edits it, and it comes out great. I think you can see I'm very, getting back to proud, I'm very proud of him. And our daughter is sensational as well. We have two very wonderful kids, and it's easy to be prideful of them when you see what they've done and how they've done it, which is the style which they operate, and it's a very high level, and something I'm always try to keep under control. My pride, that word keeps coming up. Sorry for all this twitching. That goes with the territory.
No, that's no problem. No problem at all. Great stories.
Great
I'm
stories.
sitting here just
Yeah, I
in
know.
awe.
I'm like, I don't know if you want to take a break. We could just. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, part of the fun of this job is working with people like you. You know, professionalism is a wonderful thing to have, and I've been so lucky through my years of working with great people, you know, Jim McKay, the best announcer in the business, play-by-play guy, and Mark Donahue, who I mentioned, was a guy who, when you went to shake hands with him, he pulled his hand back like that, and he just had a way of getting on top of you, you know, that it was hard to shake, you know. And Roger Penske was his car owner, our car owner, and Roger Penske is now a multi-billionaire, you know. And we were there in his first racing as a car owner, you know. And I've always been so proud of him, knowing him, and he's just a great guy. And he bought the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you know. I mean, that's the scale he operates on, you know. And I feel very pleased with my relationship with Roger. He is a member of the consortium that bought Lime Rock from Skip Barber. And when I saw that Roger was going to be on the board, I said, count me in, you know, because I'd like to be part of anything he's doing. And I'm not looking for him to make me a billionaire, although if he chooses to, I'd be happy to accept the offer. I often wonder what it would be like to have the acumen and the foresight of a Roger Penske. You know, I mean, he sees opportunities that I would never understand, even much less see, and he does it with complete honesty. He's never shortchanged anyone. You know, and, he's just a guy that when you're sort of down about things, if you think about him a little bit, it lifts you up, you know, and it challenges you. You know, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And it's not just the money making, although that overshadows basically everything. You can't look at the man and not feel a sense of awe and delight in knowing him.
I actually helped put that Emmy in the case at the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. There's a picture of me holding it.
Oh, really? That's great. So you know how great it is to hold one.
Oh my gosh, that's it though.
Isn't it weird? I mean, the body of the...
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very heavy on the bottom and
exactly.
the top.
It makes a good weapon.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
It does, with the points and everything.
Yeah.
I'm like, who made it this? I like the word luck. I consider myself one of the luckiest people alive. And you're the reason why, because I get to be here and interview you.
Well,
so thank you.
That's good. Very nice to hear. I enjoy the luck factor in racing. I did an article about it for Road and Track.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see that.
It wasn't a very good article. So.
Your writing is beautiful. And I'm like, if your son is anything quite like your writing, if he does that and I'm like, whoa, it's poetry. Your writing is poetry.
Well, I work on it. Something I shoot for, and I don't know what that is. I can't describe it, but I know when I see it.
Right.
You know, and that's something about getting past the obvious into the not so obvious. You know?
Right.
And that transition, that moment of transition in painting in particular. You're making the thing and it's not quite there, and suddenly you do something unexpected and it's there, you know, which is a wonderful thrill.
It just clicks.
You know, because you put so much time into these things, and if they're still what I call an attic painting, you know, then you've wasted all that time, except that you haven't wasted because you've learned something from the failure.